Thank you, Dr. Joy Hardiman, for joining me for Like Fine Wine, Black Joy Over Time. This is a project of Joyful Practices, Joy Actualization Coaching for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Dr. Joy, how are you today?
I am just feeling really great. Thank you.
I'm so glad that you joined me. Dr. Joy Hardiman is an author among many things. She is the author of The Resurrection of Truth from the Chains of Falsehood. She was the second dean of Evergreen State University.
Well, actually, I was, and this is an evolutionary thing. Dr. Maxine Mims founded the school, and she was the director.
Okay.
And then I took it over, and I was the executive director.
Okay.
And now Dr. Marcia Tate Arunga is the dean. So each time that we have moved into place, we have elevated.
That is fantastic.
I know.
Thank you so much for being here with me today. Dr. Joy, I adore you and I adore your energy. I'm so grateful that you chose to participate in this project. In addition to blessing the community with your accounts of joy in the course of your lifetime, it's an opportunity. This project is an opportunity for me to share love and appreciation for the people who made me the woman that I am. And some of the people that we will be hearing stories from. And we met on the Cultural Reconnection Mission trip to Kenya. And on that trip, I got to see you in your power in a way that was really inspiring. And you have since been a model for me, like who I want to grow into in terms of the projects that I lead, my business, all the things that I'm creating, like being able to step into that leadership with and utilizing the guidance of my ancestors. Like I see you do that very well, right? I've gotten to see you pour libation in community. I've gotten to see you speak on a number of different topics in the community. And I've gotten to see you have a lot of fun. And so I think that this is the piece, because there are a lot of elders that raised me and that showed me how to work and how to study and how to be excellent and a lot about my heritage and culture. And I think you embody joy like none other, right? You travel the world and you still handle business. You still do your projects, you write your books, you're still very active in community and just brilliant.
Thank you.
And I get to witness that. And I get to see what really living into your values looks like. I get to see what living into your eldership looks like. And moving with a lot of love. And you just have a generosity of spirit too. And so it's just, every time I leave you, I'm just like really full. And so I really appreciate your presence in my life and the contributions that you've made to our community. I mean, not just here, but around the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. So, thank you. And can you share some stories from your childhood, like where you've experienced joy? Like, how did you experience joy as a child?
Okay, let me think. Well, first of all, I think it's important to know that I was an only child. So I spent a lot of time in my head as a child. And I would create stories in my head. I was a ferocious reader. I would just read anything and everything I could, from Jet magazines and Ebony in the bathroom to going to the library and sneaking in the young adult section when I was supposed to be in the kids section. Comic books, anything. I just wanted to read. Almanac, Reader's Digest. I got to learn to love words through Reader's Digest. Increase your vocabulary. I would always go to that immediately and try to see how many new words I could say and how they would roll over my mouth, because I had a lisp. So I really love words with many syllables, because it made me discipline my tongue. So as a kid, growing up, like I said, I spent a lot of time alone, and I still enjoy, being alone and playing with my head and talking to myself and making up different voices and different people, all of which are having a delightful time inside there. It's like, okay, this is going to come out today. And also, as a kid, I was really blessed because my father was a Tuskegee Airman. He wasn't a fly guy, but he was the reconnaissance. He did the navigation. So he was really into maps and travel, and so he wanted me. So every summer we would spend our time 2 weeks out of the year, because he was a civil servant, traveling. Because he wanted me to go to every single state before I went to high school, so I would know the capitals. You know, so he would drill me. He'd say, "You gotta know the capitals." For some reason, he thought life depended upon knowing the capitals of all 48 states. So before I was in high school, I went to all 48 states and all the Canadian provinces, as well as Cuba, and as well as it was Canada, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and Cuba. And so so as a child, it was reading, it was traveling, how I would enjoy, and I have to say I was blessed with a sense of curiosity, you know, so I'm a lifelong learner. Yeah. In fact, I used to say, if I'm not growing, I'm going. Which, what I said with my first marriage. It's like, that's where it came up. It was like, okay, this is cool, and I really like you, but I'm stuck. We're not growing, and so I gotta go. I'll take the lamp and the pitcher, and you know, and I'm out. And and my parents. So a lot of this is parental influences. Not only were they into travel, but they really wanted me to know life beyond the city. So we would spend. So I would spend my fall going to. We would go to New England and go to my aunt's house, and she lived on a farm, and she made things and made beautiful crafts things, and so I got to see that power of the folk art. And we would go running around to different stores and look at antiques, and then bring them back and redo them. So that whole sense of putting your hand in the soil, and you know, they would. I would go and learn how to gather eggs, and you know, so that it balanced me as a city girl, and and my mother, because I was an only child, and they made a decision that they could afford to give everything they wanted to do to one child, and so they made a decision not to have many, but to invest in me, and so. As a kid, I went to the Museum of Science, and I took classes there. I went to Teepee Camporee and learned how to make fire. You know, which was great because all of these were free programs that were available. You know, to a young family kind of struggling and coming up. So I went to the Museum of Science. I went to the Albright Knox Art Gallery and took art classes and looked at them. They had me, and my mother was an activist, and so anytime she thought I might have a talent or something, and she would get and try to do something about it, and they wouldn't let black people in, then she would immediately become part of the board. You know, so she became the board of the Studio Arena Theater, and they let me in. And she became the president of the YWCA, wow. which was also segregated at the time. And she worked her way up so I could take swimming lessons. And didn't do so good with those. But the point was that that I was really blessed. Yeah. I was really blessed. But also, what was marvelous is that my parents were total opposites, and so I learned how to work in both and as opposed to either or. My father liked pork and beans and wieners, and my mother liked escargot. My father liked Ripple, and my mother liked Chivas Regal. My father liked spaghetti. My father liked to go to the Little Harlem and hang out with the guys there. My mother liked to go to the symphony. So I had a chance to really appreciate both those worlds. So it made me kind of balanced. And they also wanted me not to know that just because they were middle class and stuff like that, they were, I wasn't. And so they made sure that I didn't ever, get a big head or anything. And my mother was a special education teacher. And so she would bring kids home from the school and say, that person, she's going to spend the weekend here and you got to share your room. Because one, she wanted to expose her kids to more than what they had in their limited environments. And two, she wanted me to understand something that's always been with me. To whom much has been given, much is expected. And that, and so those were the things that, so I guess in the sense that brought me joy as a kid, reading, traveling, hanging out in nature, those were the primary things as an only child that I really kind of found myself shaping myself.
Where did you say you were from?
I'm from upstate New York, from Buffalo, New York.
Got it.
Yeah, I'm from Buffalo, New York, and I grew up in Buffalo at a time where a lot of the war was just over, so a lot of guys were coming up to the north from the south, part of the Great Migration, to get jobs in the steel plants and the state, departments and stuff like that. My parents originally came because my uncle was in the jukebox business, and so he got my dad a job, in the jukebox business. And so when he got out of the army, and so we ended up in Buffalo.
Okay, wonderful. So, what did joy look like in your 20s and 30s?
Okay, all right. Joy as a teenager was like, I was a cheerleader. I was voted the most popular girl in my senior class. I didn't think I deserved it. It wasn't until I was 40 that's something I had to work through, because I thought I was an imposter, because I thought the reason why I was voted the most popular girl in the class is because all the parties were at my house. And I thought, well, people like me because they come to my parties. And it wasn't until much, much, much later that I realized people like me because of me. It didn't have anything to do, with that kind of situation. So I had this kind of very normal, happy, cheerleader, going to football games. I dated the captain of the, really, really want to, one of those little textbook things, right? So I dated the captain of the football team, and I was a cheerleader, because I was following in my mama's tracks. Because my mama was a cheerleader, and my father was the captain of the football team.
Way.
Yeah, and so I just thought, that's I thought that's what you did. I went to Iowa, which was the worst mistake in my life in my 20s, and late 20s. And I really thought I was going to marry the captain of the football team in Iowa, which was so far in fantasy. But so in my 20s, so I came from this kind of, pretty idyllic childhood. In my 20s, I would say I was a product of the time. I was a product of the 60s. So in my 20s, I decided I wanted to be an artist. After several other attempts to be some other things in college, I was going to be a public relationist because that's what my parents thought would be a good idea. But I flunked the typing test because I typed -7 words a minute, and you couldn't get into the journalism school if you couldn't type. But I hadn't taken typing because I was also a feminist when I was in high school, and I took shop. I didn't want to take typing and be a secretary, so I still type really quite horribly today. Thank God for voice dictation. But so I couldn't be a journalism major, and I was going to be a sociologist, but I flunked the race and ethnic relations class. I was the only ethnic person in the class. Iowa was one of the most racist places I've ever been, and then I was going to go into theater, but they kept giving me the role of maids. So I ended up deciding that I was going to be an artist. I was going to live the life of an artist. I saw somebody walking across the campus one day, and her name was Cassandra Kaufman, and she had this flowing hair and this taffeta polka dot dress, and I said, "Ooh, who is she? Who is she? What does she do?" And they said, "Oh, she's an artist." I said, "Okay, I'll be an artist." So I got myself kicked out of school because they wouldn't let me. My parents, of course, wouldn't let me drop out of school to be an artist. So I looked in the rule book to find out what was the one thing that would get me kicked out of school for a quarter or so I could go to New York to be an artist. And it said petty theft or something. So I broke into the school cafeteria, and I made ice cream sundaes for everybody on my floor, and I gave cigarettes to all the smokers, and they suspended me for a quarter. So in my 20s, I spent going to New York, trying to understand what it was like to be an artist, and And I don't know how much of this I should tell, but and so I went to New York, and I was with my friend, and so he went a month before me, and then I got to New York, and I was kind of, he was showing me around, and I kept saying, "Oh, this is great! There are all these good-looking guys around here, and this is fun, and everybody's dancing and having a really good time." And then this guy came up to me, and he said, he said, "You don't know where you are," and I said, "No, I don't." He said, "You're in a gay bar, and Gary, your friend, is gay." And I said, "Yeah, I know he's happy, because it wasn't the big thing then. It's like, I know he's happy." He said, no, he has sex with men." I went, "Oh, no, yeah." And so anyway, I ended up spending about 6 months in New York hanging out with gay people and having a great time, because I could tell my mother that I was not sexually active, because she was, when I went to college, my father told me that it took 4 years to get a degree, not 9 months. So I was like really into being, heeding them. And so I had a great time in New York, just going to the Village and going to parties and hanging out in the East Village, and something happened there that kind of really shaped my life in terms of what excellence was. And that was one night I was kind of running around the Village, and I walked past the Negro Ensemble. And at the Negro Ensemble, Jean Genet's The Blacks was playing. And the cast was Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee, Maya Angelou, Roscoe Lee Brown, and two other people that were just incredible. I mean, it was like the creme de la creme. And I just sat there and watched and fell in love. I just said, I really want to create, work that has this kind of power. But also I didn't like being poor in New York, so and I was eating cat food with tomato sauce on it, because you can make little meatballs out of it, and you can pretend it's meatballs, and you put and you take the cat food and you put the tomato sauce over it, and you close your eyes and pretend. Yeah, and it didn't. The pretend didn't work very well. You were eating cat food. So I went back to Iowa, and this is my 20s. I went back to Iowa, and after 4 years, I didn't have a degree. I had a 2.4 average, right? Because I was being an artist, and it was cold. And I didn't want to go to them classes in the cold, and it was much better to sit around with people from the writers' workshop and pretend that we were intellectuals or something. So I knew I had to get a degree. So instead of getting a BA, which I had not really prepared myself for or studied, I got married. So I had an MRS. So I went home with some initials. When I came back to Buffalo, and I had these initials. And then I convinced my parents that the University of Buffalo wasn't going to accept my credits, and that's why I had to do 2 more years of undergraduate. So I did 2 years of undergraduate. I pulled a 4-point, so that I could, prove that I was now a responsible human being. Was dutifully married during those 2 years of the 4-point, and it was really, and the ritual of coming home and cooking dinner and doing all those things and studying really helped me just to focus on my studying. So I studied, I graduated, and then went to graduate school. So my 20s I spent in college, experimenting with who I was. I was part of the 60s, so I was a member of SDS because I wanted to go down south for the civil rights, and my parents wouldn't let me go down south.
What is SDS?
Student for Democratic Society.
Okay.
All right. Okay. They were the anti-war people.
Okay.
All right. We levitated the Pentagon. We really thought we did. We all went to Washington. We went, and we swore that the Pentagon levitated. Right. I was at Woodstock. I did copiously amount of drugs and LSD and stuff like that. I was part of the 60s. I was like Forrest Gump. So wherever something was happening, I was there. I was curious. I wanted to see what it was, right? So then I started teaching. So that was the 20s, and then when I turned 39, we had this big 30. We had a big snowstorm in Buffalo, and I decided I wanted to leave. and I couldn't stand the snow anymore. I was going to go. So I was throwing the I Ching at that time, and the I Ching told me, it kept saying, "You're in the abyss. You're in the abyss." And I kept saying, I know. I know. But then one day it said, it behooves you to cross the great mountains. So I applied for all these schools to teach that were on the other side of the mountain, and I ended up in Evergreen. And
hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. So you threw I Ching,
Yes.
and I Ching said, "Go for the mountains," and that's how you ended up here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm loving every bit of the story, but go ahead.
Okay, so I ended up here, and I met Dr. Mims, and I was 34, 32 at the time, and I'm 78 now. So our relationship began way back there, and I came to Evergreen. I came to Olympia. It was really white. It was really, really white. And I said, I don't know if crossing the mountains, I don't know where I need to go. And everybody kept saying, wait till you meet Maxine Mims. Wait till you meet Maxine Mims. You'll want to stay. So we're in a restaurant. All of a sudden, I see all these heads turn. And then I see this lady in the doorway with this red sweatsuit with this huge boa and these unbelievable boots of Spanish leather. And I said, who is that? And they said, that's Maxine Mims. I said, I want to be her. All right, so I keep seeing these women walking through that I want to be. So I wanted to be her. So I took the job at Evergreen. And she said, we played Monopoly one night. I was staying at her house and with her daughter Kenneth and with her daughter Tony and Kenneth and Teddy, her two kids. And we were playing Monopoly, and I'm real ruthless at Monopoly. I'm very ruthless. I become a slum landlord. I build hotels and condominiums and slum buildings on Baltic. I'm not a nice Monopoly. And she saw me play Monopoly, and she said, "I want you to be my heir apparent." She said,
Wow.
She said, I like the way you work this thing. But I'm gonna train you, and you're gonna take over, you're gonna take over my school. So that was in my 30s, and so I think the big thing when I'm in my 30s, I made my transition from white to black. Because during my 20s, essentially when I was doing my little bippy and hippie thing and stuff like that, my entire world was white.
Wow.
Because my first husband, Thomas Frederick, was white. But Olympia was too white. It got too white, and I taught there for 4 years, and I realized my soul was dying. Mm-hmm. I was realizing that I was self-medicating. I was drinking more than when how I'd been taught. My father taught me how to drink, and he taught me what combinations to take, what kind of spacing to do. Told me as soon as I heard a slur in my voice, that was it. And I was hearing slurs in my voice at 10 o'clock in the morning because I had a bottle of Dickel in my whiskey in my bag in order to kind of deal with the microaggressions. I would be in the library and other faculty would walk by and say, "Oh, you can read," So it was just all of those things and just like being very, very kind of lost and really lonely. And so in fact, there was a documentary made about it, and it was on PBS Channel 9 called "A Soul Comes Home." And the title was, "This is a story of Joy Hardiman, a 36-year-old woman who had achieved success in the white world, but felt her soul was dying." And yeah. Cleve Tyson worked on that from Seattle, and Teresa Stone at the time, and so they wanted to produce something for Black History Month that demonstrated the important examples of people giving back to the community. Mm-hmm. And I had made this decision that I was going to use my talents in the Black community. Mm-hmm. I had been teaching theater at Evergreen, and I had a very successful theater troupe, and we went to Green Hill Prison, mm-hmm. And this guy came up to me, one of the guards, and he said to me, he said, "Wow, you are very good. The kids you're working with are highly disciplined. They know what they're doing. And he said, too bad you couldn't put, you weren't putting your, too bad you didn't put your energy, or you haven't put your energy into young black boys like are in this prison, because maybe they wouldn't be here." And that was like, whoa, okay, I need to shift. I need to re-image. I need to look at my whole life. So I went through this deprogramming process with Maxine. And she made me, she made me, we went to New York, and I got a whole new wardrobe because all I had was Birkenstocks before. And then her son tried to teach me how to walk in heels, which I still don't do heels. But it was a whole transition, and I only ate black food, and I only went to black restaurants, and I only started dating black men, and the whole thing like that. So that was my 30s.
That sounds like Drop Squad.
Drop Squad?
Drop Squad is a movie.
Oh, okay. Well, I gotta watch the movie then. Yeah, it was a very interesting experience. I lived in a teepee during it, and in order to cleanse myself, do a detoxification. But I'm bougie.
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem. So I had this beautiful teepee, and I had a wooden floor. I had a friend help me build a wooden floor, and I had a Persian rug, and then it had a bed in it, and it had a desk that was color-coded with the bed, and a little typewriter. Right, like I could really type. I had a little typewriter on the thing, and I would wake up in the morning, and I'd go out of the teepee, and I'd build my fire because I went to teepee camporee, and I can do those. I got those skills. And I would put a little thing on it, and I would have my little coffee, and I would sit out and watch the Oyster Bay and just really be peaceful. And then I would turn around to the back of the teepee and walk maybe about 100 yards, and Maxine's house was right there. And I'd go in her house, and I'd take a bath in the bathtub, and I'd make some food on the thing, and then I'd go back and be in nature. So I did that for about 3 months, and I really kind of like did a lot of cleansing in my head, like kind of recommitting myself to the community. That's when I got involved in the Pan-African movement. Maxine and I went to New York, and we met Doc Ben and John Henry Clark and Ben Sertima and and ASCAC, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization, was just starting, and Maxine came in and announced that she was there and that she had money to fund it all. And they said, "Oh, we want you to be on our board." And she says, "I have no time, but take her." And so pushed me out. Just kind of went and said, "Okay, I'll be the secretary for all of you people in this organization." So also at that point, I also had a child. And that was the third kind of critical turning point for myself, because when the son was born, she was so beautiful, and people kept saying, "Oh, you look just like her," and then I could say, "Oh, I must be beautiful too," because I hadn't seen my beauty, because I had taken in a lot of external images. It was during the time, if you were dark-skinned, you didn't get as much play. When you're dark-skinned, you thought you didn't get as much play as the light-skinned girls, if your hair wasn't, So I had all of those different things. But what I learned was I had been looking at a part, not the whole. Because if I'd looked at all the people who said I was beautiful and had remembered them, I wouldn't have had to wait so long to realize, hey, but better late than never, is what I say. So that was my 30s. So my 30s was my 20s were kind of being out there. My 30s were kind of like coming to terms with who and what I was and what I wanted to do, and my commitment to the Black community, and my commitment to my child, and my commitment to myself. So then the 40s, I started with a lot of intentionality. I ended up being the director of the Tacoma campus. I came in with 4 goals. By this time, I wasn't doing theater anymore, because I got hired at Evergreen when I was in the 30s for theater, but Maxine told me that I couldn't teach theater on the Tacoma campus because everybody thinks Black people just sing and dance. and that I had a classical discipline. I had been trained in Western classical literature when I was white. So I had studied everything from the Greeks to Shakespeare, and I knew it really well. I was a Chaucerian scholar, probably, because I saw a job one time where it says they were looking for Chaucerian scholars, so that's what I majored in, and that job never occurred ever again in the universe. Nobody wanted a Chaucerian scholar, but I knew it. So what happened was, Maxine. This was in my going into my 40s. Maxine said I had to teach Western classical literature, so I found a book that said that Egyptian literature was the prototypic basis of Western classical literature, and that everything that was in Western classics had also been in the Nile Valley civilization. So coupling with my work we were doing in ASCAC, I went back to get my PhD in ancient Egyptian literary studies and urban education. So I've got the activism going on here, I've got the personal development going on here, and I've got the being supported by the school and the ancestors. And that's when I realized that ancient wisdoms could be used in contemporary times. And that's what I've done now ever since I started that work. I've looked for different ways to apply ancient Egyptian philosophies, ancient Egyptian practices, ancient Egyptian rituals, to our contemporary lives as Black people. And so my dissertation, which I did at Evergreen, was to look at the ancient Egyptian autobiography. And the ancient Egyptian autobiography is not about sin and guilt and shame and blame like the Western society is. It's about lessons learned and wisdom earned from the hills and valleys of one's life. And that's transformative. I taught autobiography from that perspective at Evergreen for 10 years. And it allowed people to not be victims, but to be victors. Because no matter what came at them, if they learned from it and could pass it on and use it to make sure it didn't happen again, or that if it happened, there'd be a different kind of understanding, then you were a victor, And so that's what I was doing during my 40s, was kind of studying that and then trying to live my life according to the values of the ancient Egyptians. George G.M. James talks about, I put myself essentially, because remember I'm an only child, so I can just go in my head and have a good time. I put myself through the ancient Egyptian mystery school. I worked very intentionally on controlling my thought, controlling my action, articulating a purpose, being steadfast in the execution of that, recognizing a higher order, something bigger than oneself that guides oneself, working on freedom from resentment. That was really a hard one. Resentment from prosecution. After 40 years in higher education, I had to work on resentment really, really hard, really hard. Ability to know your teacher, ability to be taught, and willingness to accept change and initiation. So I worked on those really steadily as a person while I was going through my 50s, and when my 60th birthday, I gave myself a graduation party at Marcia's house. I invited everybody and said, I just graduated from the mystery school, and I just want you all to come and say, yay. So, so I was doing that, and I was, being a mom, being a mom, raising a child in an extended family, kind of situation with aunties and uncles that, really were very supportive of me and her nurturing and my not knowing anything. Because I didn't know anything about raising no baby, right? Right? What is that? Gone with the Wind. Miss Carol, I don't know nothing about raising no babies, But I didn't. Because when I grew up, now I know this will sound really bougie, but I never got a chance to babysit. The only thing I got a chance to babysit was that one of my friends who was a doctor, his wife would sometimes call me to babysit coats. Fur coats, because when the ladies came, this is a really snotty group of people these were not my mother's friends. This was someone we knew. But she would have parties, and the fur coats that had to be, because the sables couldn't touch the so-and-so, and maybe something was a muskrat, and it was stupid. But they hired me, and they paid me, and I just went and sat in a room and watched coats. So it was a far jump from coats to a real life baby. Like, how do I deal with her? It was like I just didn't know anything. But I had good friends. I had good friends and real support. So I managed to raise to nurture a halfway brilliant person.
Your daughter is brilliant.
All right. Okay. A brilliant person. Yes. I have to stop saying that. That's one of the intentionalities I'm working on. We were talking a little about language. Mm-hmm. Western society causes you to diminish, and I notice how often I use the word little. And so she isn't slightly brilliant or a little brilliant. She's brilliant.
She's brilliant.
I'm not doing a little interview with a brilliant woman named Nacala. I'm doing an extraordinary historical interview. So I have to catch myself when I diminish.
Yeah, we all do.
Right.
We all do. Joy, so I am just enthralled in your story. You're a beautiful storyteller. One of the themes that I hear is how often you are led and you actually are obedient to hearing calls and following them. I mean, it happened when you were tossing I Ching and you were like, I gotta get up out of here. It happened when you saw Dr. Mims and you were like, I gotta have that. I gotta be that. When you saw the lady in the polka dots, right? So, it sounds, when I hear it, it sounds like it's something that is very easy for you, but for some of us, it's not. What is the thing that has facilitated your ability to hear a call that is going to take you to a greater place, and then your willingness to be obedient to that call?
Good question. I think I'll do it this way. My connection with the ancestors happened when I started doing my research. And
which research?
My ancient Egyptian research.
And how old were you again?
Then that was in my late 30s, early 40s. Okay. Mm-hmm. I've always had I've not known, but I guess I've always known that I was blessed with a strong spiritual connection. Mm-hmm. I mean, the first time I knew there was a greater being was when I was in Connecticut on one of these trips when I was in middle school, and I felt God. I was in the middle of a forest, and I was in a glade and in the forest, and this light came through, and it was just. I all of a sudden I knew that was a creative spirit. And it felt warm, and it felt like that it was a calmness and a peace that I didn't know, and certainly as a preteen with all my hormones, I didn't know any calmness. But it was just this little piece of calmness, and so I've always kind of felt connected with my ancestors, but it was only after I started doing research and understanding about what ancestors were, and understanding that in fact our time that there are different that it's possible to live in the past, present, and the future all at one time, and that spirits who leave us don't really leave us, and so I was never really had to deal with death as a finality, because my mother didn't deal with death at all. Our family didn't deal with death. When someone died in our community, we never went to the funerals. We went to their houses. Our job was to watch the house when the funeral was going on, so that nobody would rob it. Because that would happen, in the cities, people would look at the obituaries, and they would know when the funerals were, and then they would come and rob your houses. So in the South, there were people called house sitters, and they were families that just came and sat in the house while while the funeral was gone, and when the funeral people came, helped serve the food and left. So I never got to see, I wasn't until I was in my 55 or so that I ever saw a dead body. So the notion of death was not something that was weighing upon me. So it was really easy for me to understand that when someone died, their physical body died, but their spiritual body, their soul, their memory stayed with us. So that's a good question. I don't know when. I just know that that the ancestors are with me, and I know when I don't listen, they can be rough. They can be rough. This is a horrible thing to say. My ancestors, when I don't listen, they draw blood.
Ooh.
My first real encounter with my coming to the ancestors wrongly was when I was in my 40s or 50s, and I went to Goree Island. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I went there like a whole bunch of people went there with this whole tragic thing. I wanted to feel the pain. I wanted to feel the agony. I wanted to feel the lash.
Can you say a little bit about Goree Island for folks that
Okay, yeah. Goree Island was one of the dungeons, one of the demarcation destinations and dungeons where enslaved people were taken from both the coast and the inland of Africa and put on boats and shipped across the sea for the Middle Passage. And so all along West African coast, as well as East Africa and Mombasa and stuff like that, there are these holding pens. There are these, they call them castles, but they were dungeons. They were places of infinite horror. And people sometimes would be there packed in little tiny caves for up to 6 months, waiting to be put on a boat and taken away to someplace in the Americas. So the most significant ones on the west are in Senegal, Goree Island, and then in Ghana, Cape Coast. And so I was in Goree, and I went there, and I was dressed in white like all the people, and we got there, and women started crying, and people were all emotionally moved, and I wasn't moved at all. And I thought, okay, I'm too intellectual. I've been working in academia too long. So I went where they kept the rebellious people, because I figured I would have been there. I just would have. And I didn't feel anything. And because I wanted to feel this pain. And so I went to the door of no return, and I stood in the door of no return. That's the door that they shoved people out and put them on the boats. And I didn't feel anything. And I got on the boat to go back, and I turned around. I went to see the land one more time to make sure I felt nothing. I turned around. There was a bulkhead on the bulkhead on the ship thing. I tripped over the steel bulkhead. I fell on the cement deck. I cut my leg open, and all of a sudden I heard this voice, saying, "Pain. You want to feel pain? We'll give you pain." And I realized that my intentions and my worldview were totally wrong, that I should not have come there with the tragedy, but I should have come with the triumph. I should have come back and said, "Hey, y'all, you didn't know what happened to your children. I want you to know, some of us made it.
Yeah.
Some of us made it across the passage. And not only did we make it, even though they tried to tear our families apart, we found ways to have parents, we found ways to have family. Even though they told us we couldn't read or write, I have a PhD. I just want you to know that we have defied things." And so at that point, that totally changed my worldview. And from that point on, I have always seen the glass as half full and not half empty. I have always, decided, let me look at this as an asset and not as a deficit. I have always said, the other side of pain, is joy and release. And so my ancestors, are very clear with me when I'm off track. So I acknowledge them and I thank them and they guide me. And I know, I remember one time I was whining about, I want to be a writer, and I kept going to all these people who do divinations and saying, tell me what I need to write, tell me how I need to be, and the answer was always some version of it's inside you, the answer's not outside of you, the answer's inside of you. It was always a different version of it. Except one time in Brazil when I said, give me a Orisha, give me a little something, I can take home and put on my desk and be able to write. And they gave me a little statue of a little pink Moses. Right? Which is like you are trying to work in the wrong realm. You're trying to think about writing as laws and stuff like that. It has nothing to do with you. And finally, they got really mad at me. And when I was in Haiti, I asked the diviner, well, how can I write? And then basically the ancestor told me, use it or lose it.
They don't like it when you ask them about stuff that you already know. No, I've noticed that too.
Yeah. No, they don't. They really don't. So now I listen. I really listen. I listen to the wind. Because what I believe also is that the ancestors left us signs and symbols that will allow us to come back home. And we just have to see them. We just have to be open to them, And sometimes it can be a song at the right moment. Sometimes, like I said, it can be something that happens in nature. Sometimes it can be a touch, somehow, but like the Sankofa. There are two symbols with the Sankofa. One is a bird, and the other is a heart. And a lot of people pay attention to the bird, but not the heart.
Ooh.
Because what the Sankofa, by putting those two together, what the Sankofa is saying, go back and fetch it. But it is the intelligence of the heart.
Ooh.
Right. And that there's a reason why those two symbols are together. Because the one's a Khan, and it's really about 14th, 15th, 16th century. The heart is from the Green Sahara, so it's about 6,000 years old. Right. In fact, Tony Broder found images of the heart in Nubia, pre-dynastic Egypt. He found a heart on the wall of one of the temples of Nubia. And if you go back to the Green Sahara, you see the divine goddess is shaped like a heart. So it says if we want to get out of this mire that we're in, we have to get away from head intelligence and go to heart intelligence. So it's right there. It's like, you ever see this movie called A Brother from Another Planet?
I don't think I've seen it.
I've
heard of it, but I haven't.
Joe Morton was in it, and he's this guy who drops down to Earth, and he's escaping from an enslaved colony up in space, and he's chased by these little men who look like they're like they're little nasty dogs, and they run like this. And at one point, at the very end of the movie, they're chasing him, and he is running down the street, and he keeps seeing this graffiti, and he starts reading the graffiti. And the graffiti is telling him which way to go and how to go. And he ends up into a maroon county, and the dogs come running in, and there are all these people just standing there, and the dogs run away. So I think our ancestors have been leaving us symbols like that all the time, and we just need to be aware of them, and we just need to access them. And I just offer myself as proof of the fact that it works. It's not scary. It's not hocus pocus. It's just it's us. It's us. It's our genetic memory. It's our genetic memory. It's a symbolic stuff, and it's a fact. As Marsha's book talks about how we were missed, and I think what understanding our ancestors tell us that we're being cared for. That we're being missed, but we are being embraced, and so when that gives me light in times of darkness.
Beautiful. So, what is joy looking like for you right now?
I am having so much fun with my life right now. After I proclamated myself from the higher education plantation. After 45 years, I got my walking papers. I said, I got it, man. I got my badge as a higher education survivor. I returned to my art. I published a book. I've been telling a story about the the blinding of truth by falsehood for many, many years. I decided to turn it into a book, actually with the urging of Marcia, who kept saying, "That's a great story. Come on, put it out as a book." And it has opened the gates for so many things. In order to write the book about finding truth, I had to examine my own truth. I had to understand all the falsehoods that I had in fact been carrying with me, and I had to figure out how to get rid of them so I could write the book about how to get rid of them. So the book is both a story about bringing truth back into the world, but it's also a manual about how to keep truth there, and how to keep it in it. And part of that has been my making decisions about my life. Like, for example, I decided that I was going to live in Mexico 4 months out of every year. That I was going to follow the sun. That I deserved it. I mean, and that I had to move beyond. See, I paint when the winter comes, I paint my nails yellow.
Yes.
So that every morning I wake up and I have the sun. And I decided that wasn't enough. I had to have the real sun. So I go to Mexico, and I work on my health, my happiness, and my gratitude. And that's my mantra every day. The book has taken me to amazing places. I don't do book readings anymore because that's flat, and I'm really into multi-dimensionality and occupying as many different spaces as I can. And so I do book performances. So I read the book, and I get in and I channel the ancestors, and I get people call and response, and I take it to church.
That's right. And let's look at this book too. It is gorgeous.
Isn't it gorgeous?
Yeah,
Isn't it gorgeous?
And it's, say the title again?
The Raw Surrection of Truth from the Chains of Falsehood. And it's really important, the word raw. I use it intentionally as opposed to re. Re means to turn back in the same place. All right, so return, I'm coming back to where I started. Renaissance, I'm being born again in exactly the same place I was. We can think of all those words with re. But Re is also the name for Ra, the sun. Only in Kemetic places R-E with a little mark over the E. So what if we Ra turned? All right, and so instead of turning around like that, we turned around like that. What if instead of retreating, we Ra treated?
Yes.
And so it's like I no longer say I'm an African descendant. I say I'm an African ascendant.
Yeah.
Ascendant. I'm ascending. Each generation is ascending. All right. And so that's what I meant by the book is that we have to resurrect our relationship with the sun that creates itself daily. All right, that completes itself daily.
Yes.
So in doing that book, it has allowed me to go into all these different areas and different spaces, and my weeks start to quench my thirst for the very diverse. I mean, like just this week, the book took me to Snohomish County, and I did a reading and workshop with the book. With black women leaders who are very isolated there and have fears and have barriers, and use the book as a way to kind of unite. I think the theme was unite to reunite. Of course, I said unite. Right, so I did that, and then now today, I'm having this incredible conversation with you, and then tomorrow I'm going to go into a recording studio, and I'm going to work on the audio version of the book, which is something I have never done before, and so the thing that delights me and gives me energy in this in this phase I'm in of my life right now is learning new stuff. So I'm learning new stuff. And then on Tuesday, the book is taking me to Green Hill virtually, and I'm working with the young men in the prisons and using the book with them to figure out what are the myths that got them there, get them to understand what the societal myths and how not to buy in that. Yeah. And then I'm going on the plane, and I'm going to Sacramento, and I'm going to be doing a reading, and I'm going to be doing a panel on the book in terms of Black mental health. Okay. And then when I come back, I have 2 libations I'm going to do, which is basically to celebrate all of those resistors who resisted the master narrative and basically ushered in the Wimi Masu, which is the meta nature for new beginnings, the rebirth. So my current life, the book has, by embracing my artist, the book has taken me to all these places, and it really is satisfying because it fulfills the things that give me joy. I love to design. I love to design things. I design whether I'm designing a higher education institutional campus, whether I'm designing an itinerary, whether I'm designing what my house is going to look like. I love doing design, and I love learning new things. So I'm constantly, the book has forced me into this, forced me into a delightful place, of embracing my art, embracing my creativity, and so boldly walking into my 70s as an unapologetic, slightly arrogant, creative, and so it's an evolution and an ascension that is powered, by language and by intention.
Yes. So where can we get this book?
Yes, the book is published by Curry Brothers, 2 brothers, 2 Black brothers, and the way you get it is by going to ancestralartworks.com. Ancestral Artworks, that's an S on the end of works.com, and that's my webpage, and there's a link right there for the Curry Brothers, and it's available in hardcover, softcover, and on ebook.
And coming in audiobook, right?
And coming in audiobook.
Yes.
And then after the audiobook, when I go to San Pancho for the winter, I'm going to work on a workbook and a manual. Okay. That parents can use, that schools can use, that organizations can use. So it's just every day I wake up and there's something new to learn, and another affirmation, that the ancestors are with us, and that the Creator is good, and that this is a good place to be, and as messed up as these times are, it's still good times to be.
Ashe.
Yeah. And I have my intergenerational team that I work with. That's international. This book, the illustrator's from Venezuela.
Oh, okay.
The woman who did the proofreading for me is from Nairobi, Kenya. Okay. All right, as is my kind of thought partner, Nia Arunga.
Yeah.
Who kind of is always like, Auntie Joy, now come on, you can go here and you think about that,
Yeah.
My copywriter is in Mexico, so I have this international team of like next generation people who are artists and contributors that have just done amazing work, and I get a chance to work with them. And it keeps me alive, and it keeps me alive. It keeps me knowledgeable, in the know. And it keeps me positive, because I can just see the great works that are being done. I can just see, and not great works, the competence. The competence. Look at that big camera. I'm from Buffalo, right next to Rochester, New York. I grew up with Kodak. The little brownie camera. I can remember my father's first video camera, and I'm looking. Wow, what an amazing world.
So good.
And y'all young people know all about it, and have it in your bags and walk around, carrying your stuff. I mean, how exciting! Seriously, how exciting! Says she who comes from the era of the Xerox machine. And I still say, give me a Xerox, when I want a copy, because that's where I be from.